Ideologies are critical in thinking about this because they underlie policies and practices that we don't necessarily stop to think about. And there has been an interesting attention to this issue. How am I doing with time? 3 minutes. Okay. I'm going to just finish this and then jump to implications so we have time for that discussion. There are a number of ways in which you can see the role of ideologies. One of them is the very definitions we use in the special education field. So, for example, learning disabilities has an exclusionary clause that tells us that you should not identify a student as having a learning disability if it's due to social, cultural, and environmental issues. And somehow all those get entangled with language and race in one way or another over time. And so you have here an example of an intersectional aversive logic built in the system that prevents all of us who are trying to do the best for the kids to think in that way, to think that there are intersectional considerations that should be critical for the work that we want to do. Kangas and Cook did a study in which they found that this idea of deficit thinking was critical in the experiences of those teachers in these schools that were involved in the study. They found that, for example, a score in one high-stake test, actually one score in one subject defined placement across all subjects. And so if you didn't do well in math, even if you were excelling in the other subject areas, these students were not exposed to core content because of that test score. They, over time, tended to be tracked into what they call inclusionary classrooms, in which, in the end, were all dual language learners. And so they were segregated over time. And then the perceptions of disabilities and the English learners who have disabilities were very negative, despite the fact that a number of them, a substantial proportion of them, actually made honor roll at those schools. And that persisted, that perspective, unfortunately. Finally, when you look at the basis that we use, the research basis that we use in a lot of these interventions, a lot of these studies do not pay systematic attention to the role of culture and language in learning. And so we have an entirely colorblind literature informing the work of schools that has not changed in a long time. Even to this day, those are the kinds of things that are definitely affecting the learning opportunities that students have. One thing that we have not asked is what happened after. If we give the label to save the child, what happens afterwards? Do they learn the same? Are they segregated? Do they have access to related services compared to other students with the same label? There is evidence that the answer is no. What about reclassification rates? We haven't done hardly any research asking those consequence questions.